Hey everybody, Questwise here, and in this video we're going to talk about a product that's come out recently, fairly recently, that is designed for solo role-playing. And as I was sort of preparing for this video, I was thinking back about the past year and how this pandemic has really changed the way people are playing role-playing games. I'm a very had been in the past very traditionalist when it comes to role playing games. I like physical books. I like being at a table. I like physical dice. Um, it's kind of the old school part of me. I prefer not to do things digitally if I can at the tabletop. But this past year has really changed the way many of us play role playing games and the way we approach those games. And one of those ways is that a lot of people have gone digital with their tabletop. They've been using Roll20 or some other virtual tabletop that allows them to play with their friends still and still say, with their social distancing aspects of what's happening. Another way that's really increased as of late, and I've been seeing a lot more posts about this and a lot more interaction with this kind of stuff, is solo role playing. Now, this is not a new concept. The concept's been around for a very long time. In fact, Tunnels and Trolls, one of the very first official role-playing games after the advent of D&D, excelled in that kind of thing, in solo role-playing. There are other games out there like, and I'll talk more about those in a few minutes. Some of the other ones that are available out there, but fighting fantasy books were another one that were very influential into the idea of role playing by yourself in a solo type mode. Today we're going to talk about a product that I think has really brings a unique flavor to the solo role playing aspect, and that is DM Yourself. That is by Tom Scutt. This was I don't believe it was a Kickstarter. It might have been an Indiegogo type thing. I don't remember entirely. And in fact, I missed that entire campaign for that. But I was able to reach out to the author and talk to him for a little bit and purchase the PDF copy of the game because he's actually on the other side of the world from me. I'm in the United States. I believe he's in England. And so I wanted to do a review of this pretty quickly. So I purchased a PDF from him and was able to read it over and get a few sessions of play under my belt before I brought this to you. There's been a big increase in games out there, or supplements for games that allow you to play in a solo environment by yourself while you're separated from your group, either virtually or physically. Some of those, and there's some very notable ones out there. Iron Sworn is a great one. You've heard me talk about that before. The Solo Adventurers Toolbox for D&D 5th Edition. 4 Against Darkness. Alone Against the Flames, and a number of other adventures for the solo adventures for the Call of Cthulhu 7th Edition RPG. And they're all really great, but they all take a sort of standard approach. So 4 Against Darkness is a way to roleplay 4 individual characters doing a dungeon delve. Alone Against the Flames is a very sort of choose your own adventure type of aspect. The Solo Adventurers Toolbox is a way to integrate a bunch of oracles and random tables into using your own imagination to create your own stories for a character or two. What DM Yourself does is it takes almost all of those aspects and redefines them in a way that allows you to play published adventures as if you were a player, using these ideas that Tom has built up over his time of playing solo, and given it a unique twist. And I really appreciate this aspect of solo role playing. So what it does is, this is like a 60-page PDF, roughly. I think it's about 60 pages, 60, 61. But what he does is he gives you the option. And now this is just, currently it's for 5th edition. Having talked to the author a little bit, he has discussed some ideas of maybe possibly um, making it sort of a generic type system as well too, that allow you to use other games, maybe Castles and Crusades, Palladium Fantasy, kind of make it a generic thing so that you can use this concept, this idea, for running games in other systems besides D&D 5th edition. I think the reason he approached D&D 5th edition is because it's the most popular right now, and it's the easiest. With some of the supplements and stuff that are out, it's really the easiest way to sort of start doing this. And I found that in my journey through solo role playing in the last few months or so, is that D&D 5th edition, currently with what's out, some of the extras that they have available, the creature cards, the spell cards, the D&D Essentials box set, has really made solo role playing easier. It's giving you a lot of tools that allow you to do that. Now, there are games like Forbidden Lands that do a great job as well with that too. Things like giving the monsters a random table of how they attack in any given situation, kind of thing, which allows you as a game master to sort of create and keep the creatures in the game fresh and new and interesting. But if you're solo role playing, it also gives you those options to surprise yourself. And that's what Tom has tried to do with this product, DM Yourself, is he's tried to take published adventures like the Rise of Tiamat, or any of I'm trying to think of some other ones. The Adventures from Ghosts of Saltmarsh. You can use any of those types of things, those published adventures, and create a character and run yourself through it without sort of spoiling the whole thing for you. Now, normally, a lot of those adventures, as a dungeon master, you would read through those and prepare before the adventure starts. With this concept, you don't want to bring yourself any spoilers. You want to try to play the adventure as pure as possible, and that's not ever going to be completely 100% possible, because as you're reading through the adventure and you're playing through making decisions on situations and stuff, there's going to be an amount of spoilerage. But what he has done here is tried to safeguard you against certain aspects of that, while still giving you a fun, immersive adventure. There's a few ways he's done that. First of all, he's added in what he calls safeguards, things that make the adventure a little bit more survivable, because the idea here is that you're using one character, you're running one character through these adventures that have been sort of designed to have like 4 to 5 players at a time. The way he's done that is he utilizes the sidekicks rule. Not so much a rule, but the sidekick aspect. That was introduced in the D&D Essentials box set. And it allows you to sort of bring somebody along, an NPC who's sort of a fellow character who's joining in the journey. And what that does is it sort of fleshes out your character in ways that they might not have access to other things. So if you're playing a fighter and you come up against some puzzles, some traps kind of thing, it's nice to have a sidekick who's, and I think they believe they call it an expert in the box set, someone who has skills with disarming traps, or those kinds of aspects of things that might help your character be a little bit more broad skill-wise when bringing it to the table. You might need some healing magic. Well, you might have a sidekick who has the ability to tap into a little bit of that. The great thing about sidekicks is that they level up with your character. And so they're kind of there as your partner to follow you along. So they're not a fully fleshed out character unless you really want them to be, but they are a nice NPC to tag along. He's also introduced the idea, excuse me, of Hero's Luck. So this is you get 3 points of this at the beginning of an adventure. And I was using poker chips, fate points, if you will, from a different, from the Dark Eye, which is a German role-playing game. Poker chip size things that have, some cool symbols on them and whatnot. I was using those, but you get 3 of those. And basically what it is, you can spend those in order to have advantage on a roll. You roll an extra d20 and it gives you a little bit of a bonus. It gives a little bit more luck to what your character is doing at any given time. The other thing he introduces is plot armor. And I've seen this in a few other games, but not very often. And it's kind of an interesting idea. So plot armor is that you get 1 point of this per character level. So if you're first level and you spend it, you don't get another one until you reach second level. And there's a number of different ways within the PDF, within the product itself, that he describes that you can do levels, the milestone idea. You can, rack up experience points, whatever feels more comfortable to you in your game. But what plot armor does is it basically saves you from death, but you get 1 per level. So one of the things that you can do is that if your character is near death, you can use this plot armor thing and come up with an idea of why your character does not succumb to death. There's also a couple of charts in the book that make that if you can't come up with something on your own, you can roll on these charts. It gives you ideas of things like, the enemies leave you for dead, or maybe you're bound and gagged in a prison somewhere, and now you have a new situation where you need to try to escape. It gives you ideas as to why the storyline would sort of, like he describes it as in a movie, the screen kind of fades to black, and then when we come back to the scene, the character is in some kind of predicament but still alive, and it gives you kind of those ideas. And I like that aspect, because a lot of these adventures, especially playing with one character and even with a sidekick, especially at low levels, are going to be difficult. They're going to be tough, and you're going to need that plot armor to sort of protect you, to carry on with your campaign. One of the other ideas he comes up with too is lowering the difficulty of the adventure. Now he does give some aspects as to how to make the game easier and more difficult if you want to go that route. If you want to try to run through one of the adventures, paths, settings, whatever, and you want to do it in an extremely difficult way, he gives you some options for that. But there's ways of making the game a little bit easier so that you can enjoy the story. Some of that is that you just adjust a few things. So first of all, when enemies score a critical hit, they don't do double damage. It's just normal damage. Another way to mitigate that is that a lot of times, and I would say 9 out of 10 times in the adventures, when it lists the damage amount for an enemy or an adversary, it'll tell you what dice to roll for that, whatever weapon they're using, but it also gives you the average amount of damage. So you don't have to roll any dice if you're trying to do it quickly. He suggests you use that average amount of damage. That stops you from rolling these huge numbers and wiping out your character. So to use those average numbers instead of rolling the dice for enemies attacking your character. He also suggests lowering the creatures or adversaries' hit points to 3/4 of their total. Makes them a little bit more defeatable. He also gives suggestions on things like enemy and adversary morale, ideas of how they might react once they've been sort of reaching a certain hit point level. Once you've sort of weakened them down, they might run away. It might be self-preservation. They might try to, escape so they can come back and fight another day. Those kinds of things. But lowering their hit points to about 3/4 of their total hit points. And another way he talks about too is using some of the action economy in a way that makes things a little bit faster for your character. So for example, the rule book says to drink a potion, it takes a full action. And that means that takes up your full action. It takes time to pull that thing out, uncork it, drink it, and receive its sort of abilities that it's giving you. He suggests making those bonus actions so that you can do those and still take an action. It makes it a little bit faster. It's a little less realistic, but then most of the rules that we use in this game are anyway, right? So it makes things a little bit faster, and that's one of the suggestions he makes there. He also suggests doing this, he calls setting default behaviors. And this is a really interesting, I've seen this, you see this a bit in Burning Wheel as well, a little bit in Ironsworn as well too. What I really think is cool about this is that in order to avoid certain things, in order to avoid spoilers, you're reading a block of text in one of the adventures, and it says, the evil overlord has a potion or a ring of armor or fire breathing or whatever, some kind of magical artifact or magical ring, and it's tucked in one of his pouches. And you read that. So instinctively, when you defeat him, you want to try and go get that thing. What the default behaviors does is that you're sort of creating a character that you're running through the adventure. So while you're still in control of the character, you setting a default behavior is something like, I always check for traps. I always loot the bodies of my fallen foes. I always listen at locked doors or closed doors. Those types of things. Or I don't waste time looting dead bodies. Or it might be an alignment thing. The idea that maybe you're playing a paladin or something and be like, I do not defile the dead as they lay. So that sets these kind of behaviors in that it's sort of what your character would do in certain situations. So if your default behavior is, I always check for traps, there's less of a chance you're going to be caught flat-footed when you encounter a trap, when you're coming into a situation. Where if you don't set those default behaviors, or your default behavior is, I'm recklessly going through this dungeon to get to the very end. I need to get to the end. It's a time-sensitive type thing. Those are the things that are going to trigger traps for you when you enter rooms that you're not checking for. It just sets a little bit more mystery and a little bit more narrative to the game as you're playing it. I started out sitting down with a couple of different adventures. It's October at the time of filming this, so I dabbled a little bit with the Curse of Strahd, which is super fun anyway. One of the other ones I dabbled with was Waterdeep Dragon Heist. That's where I actually kind of created my character for. I created a character who is using the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide. I have a character who is a rogue, but who is also, his background is that he is a faction agent of the Harpers. And it came up with the idea that my character was an orphan who was adopted by an elderly man who he later found out, that my character found out in his teens, was a member of the Harpers in the Forgotten Realms, the secret organization. And when his foster father had died, a few Harpers had arrived to sort of see his passing, and they took his Harper pin, which every Harper has this medallion that they carry with them secretly, and they gave it to him my character as a gift. And so the idea was that my character had actually started the game not officially being a member of the Harpers, but wanting to uphold those ideals. And so in Dragon Heist, not to give you any spoilers because I want you to go and use this product to play some of those adventures, but at the very beginning of that adventure, you meet Volo and he gives you a task. And so instantly it fed into my character's thing that he wants to prove himself to be a Harper. And hopefully, by proving himself, he can become an official member of the Harpers. And that kind of started the adventure off. And so by using DM yourself, it was a very interesting take. Now, while I had already skimmed through a lot of Dragon Heist and kind of knew what was upcoming, there's enough stuff in there that I think keeps that fresh and new. Some of the more open world sort of adventures, things like Tomb of Annihilation, would be a little tougher to use in this, but not impossible. In fact, he even touches on that in the product and talks about how to mitigate those things so that you can still enjoy the game. And what his goal is to give you an immersion of a player, so you don't just feel like you're reading a choose your own adventure. You're not just feeling like you're doing all the work yourself of rolling these dice and coming up with these ideas. Now, he does give you some oracles in the back of the product for those situations where you're going to come up into a point where you need to come up with an idea and you're not certain exactly what should happen in the situation. And so those are oracles in there as well too. And he even mentions some of the other things like the Solo Adventurer's Toolbox and stuff as well too. Great product. I highly recommend it. I believe you can contact him directly. I will put out a link down below as to where you might be able to go and check that out. I'm not sure if there are print copies left, but I know that the PDF is available. And like I said, he had mentioned to me that he was possibly, hopefully, making this into a generic thing so that you can use it with other things like Castles and Crusades or whatever you might happen to want to use it with. So until next time, I am Questwise. Be safe and game on, my friends.